Good evening, brothers and sisters. I hope you all had a wonderfully relaxing weekend and were able to refresh, recreate, and grow in holiness over that time. I got to spend 20 hours in the car. So I, for one, am glad to be in a position where I can stretch my legs again and not have to worry about that. And so, as you've probably noticed, we've moved back to Central Time from Eastern Time and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Now, I do have an announcement that I've got to say is that there will not be a stream next week. I am going on my annual retreat next week, and it's a great opportunity for me. It's a great opportunity. It's also required by law that I go on retreat every year, and this particular retreat is a silent retreat. So I will not be bringing my laptop. I will have my cell phone turned off. Will be unplugged from the rest of the world, and I am looking forward to that. So it should be a good time. But you will all have to find some other way to amuse yourselves next Monday evening. Now, for what I've been thinking about is a couple of recent videos from navigating patterns. I've got the links down in the description if you want to follow up on those later on after this stream. Obviously, they're both from navigating patterns, friend of the show, and man, this is pointed. Well, I'll just have to sit up straight then. One on hierarchy, another on flattening the world. And this word hierarchy gets used a lot, and it's a worthwhile thing to talk about. Um, Now, there's a particular thing that he brought up on a couple of different occasions. Uh, he said over and over again that people who are higher up in a hierarchy can see things that people who are lower down on the hierarchy cannot see. And I thought that that was a really useful and interesting insight, and it matches with my own experience. One of the benefits of being higher up in the hierarchy is that you, just by reason of your position and by reason of your responsibility, are going to have a broader vision of what's going on in your organization, in your body, in your place, whatever it is that you are up to. So what they do lose, however, is a little bit of granularity there. So that's just a trade-off there, but it's typically an absolutely worthwhile and necessary trade-off. And I had an experience that sort of trade-off right here in my own life recently. So part of my job as a bishop secretary is to um, manage the bishop's confirmation schedule for about 10 weeks in the spring. Bishop and I are on the road for just about every weekend. We go around all over the diocese, do the confirmation and first communion masses for our third graders. So I have to manage that. And there's always a little bit of, negotiation, right, with the pastors and with myself, just try to figure out how to make this all work. If I had two bishops, then I could do a lot of really cool stuff. But I don't have two bishops. I just have the one, and him and I can only be in one place at once. So it can get a little interesting. Now, I was dealing with a pastor, and this is a really good pastor. He's a very conscientious fellow. He is well respected. He's in one of the larger parishes in our diocese, and everybody knows that this is a good guy. He asked for a particular switch. He wanted to get the best time and set things up in the best way for his parish, and he thought that this switch would be good for his parish. And I bet you it would have been good for his parish, but it would not have been good for that whole weekend road trip. This is a weekend road trip. We would be spending 2 different nights in 2 different places, and it would have completely messed up everything, not least of which with the parish that he wanted to switch in. So I had to say no to that. And I don't like I I don't like having to say no to guys. I usually like to work with them I can, but I kind of had to say, the way that I had this arranged is going to be the best way to make this work for the whole. And maybe his little part of the whole is going to have to deal with things being a little less convenient than they might like. But I think that's just going to have to be the trade-off that we have to make on this weekend. So that's just a very a little example of what Mark is talking about. That when you're higher up on the hierarchy, I can see all of these problems with the confirmation schedule. That this particular pastor, who's focused on his parish, as he dang well should be, in this matter. Uh, he also brought up. I just think this is a interesting point here. He in his hierarchy video, he talks about Lowell, Massachusetts, which was an industrial town in the early part of the 19th century there, and how a small group of investors revolutionized manufacturing in America, um, and built quite the large textile mill operation. It takes somebody with that kind of vision to be able to see those opportunities. So even though a lot of people cooperated in that project, you had a machinist building these improved textile milling machines. You had construction workers who built the buildings, people who came in and actually ran the things. The capacity to see an opportunity like that is not something that's actually widely distributed. Um, Most people are just much better at attending to a much smaller, more bounded task rather than something very abstract, like seeing an opportunity and seeing uh, a market there. I also think that's what Steve Jobs provided to Apple when he was still alive and still working there. He really saw an opportunity for the iPhone to take off and saw the market there. We're all dealing with the consequences of that now. Schools in North Dakota have now done a uh, full day cell phone ban at every level of education. And I couldn't be happier. I think that is what our students are going to need. And I also think so. This is kind of the final application here. This idea that those who are higher up on the hierarchy can see things and do things that people who are lower down on the hierarchy cannot see and cannot do. I think this is what explains election in Catholic theology, election and even predestination there. The process by which we are justified, the process by which we are sanctified, brought into the kingdom of God, and removed from the dominion of evil powers and brought under the kingship of Christ is far beyond what any individual human being can manage. It's far beyond what we could do in our own power. And this has been insistence both in the Bible, it's quite clearly written in the letters of St. Paul, and also in the dogmatic theology of the church. You can especially find this in the Synod at Orange, but in a more a detailed way, even in the sixth session of the Council of Trent on justification. This idea that we are completely incapable of saving ourselves from our sins, completely incapable of, by our own power, redeeming ourselves and redeeming the world, and completely dependent on the operations of divine grace for those things to happen. Because it is so far beyond our human capability and our understanding. It's something that's eminently of the spiritual world. Uh, it's something that we cannot fully grasp and understand how it works, but we can still participate in it. So it's that hierarchy then helps us to kind of understand that we can look at these lower level examples, see how much we already don't understand, because I know that there are things that happen in our diocese at a level above me that I do not know is happening. And, I just have to leave it in the responsibility of somebody else's hands. And once we get that understanding on a more human level, can help us to understand why it's necessary to have the doctrines of election and even predestination, because these things are beyond what we can accomplish, and we have to wait for the Lord to accomplish them and in us and for us. So that's what I've got. Hierarchy saves the day again. And this time we can talk about the hierarchy in terms of the divine hierarchy. We've got the StreamYard link ready, and GN, I sure hope that there was a good word for you in there somewhere. And Jonathan, would you believe that the director of our retreat is actually a Jesuit? And I've heard good things about this fella, that he is a solid and reliable retreat director. So I am looking forward to that. And yeah, that's not how it works, RJ. The Pope would have to assign us another bishop, and dioceses of our size do not get two bishops. That's just not how it works. So yeah, we got to wait for the top to intervene in the bottom for these good things to happen, and we're not in control of that, and people don't like it. Discuss.
I love the materialism and the economic frame flattening the hierarchy to we'll buy one from below with emergence because it's good. Yeah, you can just see these patterns. They're kind of everywhere. So I
Fun
like
fact:
that.
you can buy Episcopal consecration.
Yeah,
It's a mess. I don't like it, but like,
no,
there's guys you give them $5,000. They were consecrated bishops, and then so. But we're not going to do that, because anybody who gives that or receives that automatically gets an automatic excommunication reserved to the apostolic see. And if I've got one rule, it's don't get excommunicated.
there you go.
Like, I can fix a lot of different things, but like getting kicked out, bad news. Bad news,
That's
bear.
bad news. That's bad news. Yeah, I like. I mean, I like the obviously that you use the videos, but the real point of hierarchy is basically to do anything bigger than you. And also, you're already embedded in these hierarchies anyway, so you should
Mm-hmm.
figure out where and not try
Mm-hmm.
to stop it, because you're not gonna stop. You're gonna trade it one that is of whatever quality for one or more that are of lesser quality. In all cases, it never
Right.
works any differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Another guy. I had so many examples of people at a lower level not comprehending what's happening above them, and that's okay. And another one is basically like children, small
Yeah,
children, right?
this is
Like,
what's so
you're
puzzling.
embedded in a
Yeah.
hierarchy. You're a 3-year old. You don't know how the mortgage gets paid. You don't know what a mortgage is. Mom and dad take care of that, and your concern is like playing nice with the other kids, uh, making sure that you're starting to learn your colors and the names of different fruit and animals. Like, that's your job right there. And yeah, so yeah,
Yeah. It's just
yeah,
so funny to me because I'm like, have you not met children? Why is this confusing to you? But it just seems like even people with kids, don't understand hierarchy. And I'm like, how is this possible? You're swimming in it. Like, you're drowning in it. And all you're doing is complaining instead of just floating. I don't get, and they go to Western Buddhism. And I'm like, Western Buddhism is the ultimate float in the hierarchy and stop rebelling. I don't know how people get there. Hey, Ron.
What I came on because I heard Father Eric saying he's trying not to get excommunicated. Praying for you. I'm hoping.
thanks. I've had a pretty good run so far. I'm confident we can keep it going. And I studied all the things that can get you excommunicated this summer. So I'm like, I should be very well equipped to avoid this, you know.
So,
Like
what is it? Like, thou shalt not divulge anything in the confessional. I know that
okay,
one.
yeah.
That's after that, I get a little fuzzy. I'm like,
Solicitation for sins against the sixth commandment in the confessional, very bad. Treated
what?
very, very sternly.
Can you fill in a Hebrew brother? What do you mean? But I don't know.
So in the Catholic rendering, the sixth commandment is thou shalt not commit adultery. And we use that in canon
Oh,
law, sin against the sixth commandment, for a wide variety of sins of a similar nature. So, yeah, soliciting that in the confessional is extra
oh,
bad.
what, dude? Soliciting that, dude? Like even a thug in Cleveland would know. Like, you messing with the wrong dog. Like,
You
you
know,
crazy.
but we have a law for it because
Wow. Okay. So, in case I ever become a priest, I'll know not to do that.
don't do that. You know, you
Okay.
should think it'd be
All right.
obvious, but we have it written down anyway, just to make sure. Oh,
Is there?
RJ's got a good question here.
All right, what's that?
What does defrocking mean in hierarchy sense versus a full excommunication? So,
Hmm.
excommunication is a medicinal penalty. It's designed to be applied to get you to wake up and to stop whatever it is that you're doing. Defrocking is a calm term, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, a way of the proper term for that is reduction to the clerical state or the lay state. That is an expiatory penalty. That's something to punish you in a more permanent way. So with an excommunication, if whatever that you've done, you go to the appropriate authority, you say, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that anymore." They have to lift the excommunication because you don't have access to the sacraments and all sorts of different things when you're excommunicated. And
I
so you can't be given that permanently. Whereas an expiatory penalty could be more or less permanent. That's what reduction to the lay state would mean. And you might say, "Oh my gosh, is being lay really that bad that you would be reduced to that as a punishment?" And the answer is yes, because at that point the church no longer has any obligation to provide for me. Whereas if I was merely excommunicated, they would still have an obligation to provide for my basic needs. So, yeah. And yes, recommunion is definitely a possibility. The goal of excommunicating somebody is actually to get them back into communion. So that's the way it's used in canon law. I don't know what the Orthodox use that term for. That's the way we
Oh,
use it.
wow.
It's a punishment to
I thought that.
expedite a correction. All the flat worlders just have this image that when something's done, it's permanent forever. Or something like very
Mhm.
strange. It's a strange way to look at the world. Like it never changes. Or like doing things isn't designed to
Listen,
change the
I don't
world
hear that much.
and improve it.
Well, no. To be fair,
Yeah.
I
Anyway,
didn't like RJ. I didn't know you can be was. I learned something here. I'm like, huh.
yeah, a lot of people don't know this and they don't need to know it because
Yeah.
they're not at that
Wow.
level, right?
Why would you know that?
Learning moment.
Yeah.
Brought
Yeah,
to
like you're not supposed to have to know everything. Like that's what the
Right.
problems, all the problems we have today, all of them are people trying to know more than they can. All of them. If they just stop doing that and know the things they're best at, everything would function fine and submit to the rest of the hierarchy. That's all you got to do. And then you're under less stress.
We can't go back, Mark. There is only progress.
He loves to torture me. He loves to torture me. He's just mirroring Vervaeke. We can't go back. We can't go. Vervaeke's had conversations where he says we can't go back like 6 times. And I'm like, bro, I heard your idiotic statement the first time. You didn't have to be dumb 5 more times.
Well,
I got the dumb part already.
It's sort of like, what do you mean by going back? Right? Because you hear this all the time. You know, we can't reset the clock. And it's like, understood, bro. But like, you know, if there was something that we were doing that was good, you know, maybe we could just go back to doing that. Like, that's not impossible. That's actually it's actually perfectly sensible. You know, and sometimes you just try things, and you find out they don't work, and then you just got to go try something else. Like,
right. Well, but it's worse, especially with guys like Vervaeke, because they go, we can't go back. But let me tell you about Neoplatonism. It's like, excuse me, hold on, right? Or they go, I'm going to go to the philosophical Silk Road, and I'm like, pretty sure the Silk Road hasn't been a thing in quite a while. I thought we could go back. So they're not even being honest at all. And to be fair, they're dumb, so they don't know they're lying, but they are lying, obviously. So this is one of those weird things that people do that I'm always like, I don't think you understand what you're saying. I hear you pretty clearly, though. It's just stupid.
Yes, indeed.
I just came on to say hi. I'm gonna be
Right.
listening
Good to see
here
you.
in the hive mind. You guys
Always
got any
good to
prayer
see-
requests?
I mean, I'm the one who's going on retreat here pretty soon, so I should be taking your prayer requests.
You know, I'll tell you
7
what.
days in silence, Ron.
Really? Oh,
Ooh.
dude. I don't know if you knew this, but I was a Zen Buddhist living at a Zendo. And I really liked the monastic life, you know, the quiet. It was beautiful, you know, and so have a great time. You know, I hope
think I will.
And I'll be praying for you. You know,
Thank you. Pray that the Lord's will be done and that I won't get in the way of it.
yeah.
There you go.
Go have fun. But I'll see you guys. Bye.
See ya.
Yeah, I think the reason why we, quote, can't have nice things is because no one will submit to a hierarchy. And then you can't have nice things. That's simple. You want nice things?
Look, this is real simple, right? Like, I knelt in front of the bishop and I promised him respect and obedience to him and his successors, which is nerve-wracking because I know him. I don't know his successors. We won't until like 16 years from now, something like that.
Wow.
So, you know, but you know, I get to go on this retreat and the retreat master gets to be in charge and I get to do what he says. And that makes things simpler because he is Jesuit and when the Jesuits are behaving themselves, they're like the experts at retreats. So like universities, retreats, and missionary work. They're really good at all three when they're behaving themselves.
Yeah, as long as they don't get out of control in their missionary work, they're fine. Then traumatize all the Protestants.
Well,
These things happen.
now I do fundamentally agree with Mr. GN here that the Dominicans are superior to the Jesuits, and if you need a demonstration of this, the Dominicans were founded to combat the Albigensian heresies. And Mark, have you ever met any Albigensians?
Not a one.
Okay, and the Jesuits were founded to combat the Protestant heresies. Have you ever met any Protestants?
Boy, that's the best point I've ever heard on anything.
I rest my case. However, the Jesuits do have more range than the Dominicans. Dominicans, they're like universities and preaching. That's their thing, and they do that very well. Um, but yeah, the Jesuits have a little more range to them. So anyway, has the weather
Yeah.
improved at all down there, Mark?
I'm just thinking about hierarchy.
Just thinking about hierarchy.
Well, yeah, I
So
mean,
you,
part of the recession of the church is the loss of the monasteries, and part of it is the
Mhm.
loss of the enforcement of the hierarchy, and that's the real problem, right? Is we 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 don't we don't have that prevalence anymore, and it's been hamstrung in the U.S. by certain presidents who claim to be Republicans anyway. Um, and yeah, it's sort of hard to it's hard to figure out a way out of that, right? Because we don't have anyone in the US to legitimate the government. And
Mhm.
that's and the big problem right now is everybody's looking at the fact that the government doesn't work in a video game style and saying, then therefore we must get rid of this part of the government anyway, right? And it just turns out that when you aggregate all the people saying that about all the parts of government, there's no more government left. And so if only a fraction of them get their way, we're really screwed,
Yes,
right?
yes, and then the anarcho-capitalists will have their day, and things will get even worse.
It is the weirdest combination of words that can't go together. It's not the worst. The worst is agnostic atheist, obviously, but anarcho capital, it's like I don't it's just like so you're part of a group that can't be a group because you deny groups and you think that has anything at all to do with capitalism somehow? Like, how retarded are you exactly? Could you please state your IQ as a fraction of a whole of the whole number one, please? Because like there's dumb and then there's that. I don't know what that is, but you passed stupid and dumb a long time ago on the road to get there. Gotta tell you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the trouble with hierarchies is eventually you have to actually, you know, get to the top. Um,
Yeah.
and if you refuse to acknowledge the existence of God and refuse to have a spiritual realm, you get to the top way too soon.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and you can't yeah, you can't be sane, you know. Whereas if your hierarchy can go up to the top, then you know it can actually have the completion that it needs.
Yeah, I think too, people don't sort of realize the what happens when you have an inherent corruption of that hierarchy. So when you when pieces are missing or, you know, whatever, it creates all these distortions in the things that get built. And you know, I've been trying to explain this to people for a while. Like one of the big problems we have with the bursting open, we'll say, of the ivory tower academia, however you want to think of it, is that now you've got people listening to experts. And then you've got guys like Taleb writing a book called Skin in the Game. And what do experts never ever have? They never have skin in the game. They never have experts. Experts with some skin in the game are called consultants. That's
Mhm, mhm.
actually what they're called technically. But I keep trying to tell people, no, 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 no. You are a Muppet. You should never listen to an expert ever. Because how do you know if they're an expert? And how do you know they're right? It's the classic
Well,
problem.
yeah, yeah, and some of it's got to be on trust, right? So you might, let's say, hire an expert in law to help you with some kind of a legal case. Uh,
Right.
but in theory, when these things are working properly, and you know that maybe there's some evidence that there are problems, um, there's a whole body of people that say this guy is truly, properly expert in law, and you can hire him. That would be the Bar Association. And are those working properly? Other people can say whether or not they are, but it's like, well, this is a Bar Association lawyer, and hopefully the Bar Association would let Joe the plumber know that this guy's an expert in contract law, and he can help him in his lawsuit against the place that hired him and didn't pay him for the work he accomplished.
Right.
And hopefully they could just settle out of court quickly and move on. Like, that's usually the least bad outcome for everybody, except for the lawyers. They don't make quite as much money when they do that, but never mind that. Yeah, I was thinking. So there aren't a whole lot of canon law experts in the United States, right? But I know that several of the faculty at the Catholic University of America are frequently consulted by bishops, by bishops for cases that they're dealing with in their diocese. And they're usually priests. So I'm wondering, like, does just like that ordination to the priesthood give them skin in the game? Because I would absolutely, in fact, one of my professors, I asked him to review my first Defender of the Bond brief, just to make sure that like I had all of the necessary and vital ingredients in there. He pointed out a few things that I needed to add, so I was very grateful. So anyway, just discerning whether or not somebody has skin in the game can be an interesting thing.
Yeah, but that's why you don't listen to experts. You listen to leaders, because leaders take responsibility. And so leaders always have skin in the game, because if they give you bad advice, it's up to them to either do something about it or lose their status. And that's the advantage of having leaders, right? Their status depends on their responsibility, which means they have skin in the game for everything, which is also a great sacrifice that people don't sort of recognize. It's so funny. So we've been rewatching Babylon 5, and like all of this is in Babylon 5. Like everything's there. It's hysterical because it's sci-fi's had all this stuff from the beginning, and it's just now we're ignoring it. And this last episode was particularly Catholic sounding.
Any good story is going to have all of this.
Well, yeah. Well, that's a different argument. But like, this guy's an atheist who's a lapsed Catholic, but he's an atheist. He grew up atheist, allegedly. But like the Catholic story, like he keeps slipping in all this Catholicism. It's hysterically funny because you can't write stories without following the template of
inside of you, man. It gets inside of you. You can't get away from it. Papa Leo, you can't get away from him, man.
There we go. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that these things sort of work out that way, right?
Yeah.
But hierarchy is the thing that allows that interaction to happen. And with everybody trying to listen to experts, what they do is they move from expert to expert to expert. It's a Dark Horse podcast one week, and it's Matt Fradd the next week, and then it's Jordan Peterson, and then who knows, right? They're all bouncing around all over the place.
Now, I listened to an excellent Pints with Aquinas podcast on my way home. It was with one of the Dominican friars who runs the Thomistic Institute. He helped inspired some of this. So the Thomistic doctrine of the fall, right? So Adam and Eve's rebellion is that when Adam and Eve were created, they were constituted perfectly, such that their passions in their body were completely and perfectly subject to their soul, and their soul was subject to God. But when they rebelled against God, their minds rebelled against God, then their passions began to rebel against them. So it's like, well, you want rebellion? The rebellion's going to go all the way down, and now you're going to have your passion. And that came up during their discussion. It was just like, oh yeah, that was a really good. It's amazing how these things work. and the Dominicans bring it all together for us. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Good to see you,
Yes.
sir.
Likewise. I am jumping on here because I wanted to ask a question. Father Eric, you had mentioned justification and sanctification, and I was curious how you would define the difference between those, because this was
Sure. So they are concomitant, right? So they always come together. They're not two separate things. Like you could be sanctified without being justified, or the other way around. But they are distinct. So justification is the removal of the human soul from the dominion of Satan and under the dominion of Christ, right? So it's a changing of your trajectory and changing of the course of your life. With that will come the beginnings of sanctification, where your soul begins to receive the operations of the Holy Trinity, Holy Spirit, and that you become, you begin to heal from the defects that are caused by your sins, and you begin to conform yourself to Christ. So that's where those two come in. So justification can be binary, unjustified to justified. You make that movement, but sanctification admits of gradation and degrees.
that makes sense. Yeah, I was curious because the Martin Luther was famous for doing the sola fide, justification by faith alone, and which was famously declared anathema, I guess. But that seemed to me, when I was looking at it, seemed to be like he was like separating justification from sanctification to get the by faith alone, which seems like a clever way to win an argument with the Pope, but especially if you're a lawyer or something. But
Yeah,
Requires-
no, and that was, specifically brought up in the Council of Trent, obviously, because they were responding to Protestantism at that time in Session 6. I know Session 6 really well because Dr. Washburn absolutely pounded it into us. So if you hear me talk about Session 6 of the Council of Trent a lot, that's why. Like he just hammered that into us repeatedly. So the Council of Trent, Session 6, says that faith is the root and source of all justification, but it's there's more to it than faith alone, because like your repentance is itself a work, right? And your cooperation with the grace of repentance is itself a work. So yeah,
it's one of these mistakes that thinkers make because they're not out in the world, where if you only have your personal private perspective and that's all you have, right, then the world is very flat and you are at the center of it. Technically, this is a technical math problem at some level, right? And so if you don't have access, and in propositions don't care. You can make arbitrary relationships in propositions. If you don't have access to something that's outside of you that's judging, right? But and any relationship is a judgment, right? Like my relationship to the sun right now is a judgment on whether or not it's night or day. It's nothing to do with me, right? Because it's night out. It's dark. The sun is gone. And that's the relationship that I have with the sun right now. But without that, I can just say it's daytime here in South Carolina all day long. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. And then what gives you the right to say that? Well, I have faith that my statements are true. Okay, but also, right? Because it becomes all self-referential. And Nassim Taleb actually talks about this. He tweeted about it a couple of weeks ago, maybe three weeks ago now. He said, like, the biggest problem that people have is they don't recognize circularity. Well, self-reference is a type of circularity, right? It's a circular reference back to yourself, right? And a lot of people do this too when they use a word to define the word, right? Like John Vervaeke loves to say the really real. And I'm like, you didn't just do that, John, please. He was such I swear to everybody, he was a lovely teacher in 2020. I don't know what happened to him. We tried our best to make it not happen because we saw it coming, but he really didn't do stuff like that back then. That's relatively recent. When he does it all the time now too, and I'm just like, this is a bad, the really real, and they like to do the the being beyond being, and I'm like, you guys can't talk like this. You will never be able to convey information outside of your head by using that methodology.
Right. Whereas in my philosophical studies in the Catholic tradition, constant reference was made to squirrels and trees because we were all in a classroom, and when we needed to, have an example of something in nature, we'd look out the window and trees and squirrels, and so it's like we're trying to reference our minds out into the world there, and talk about how it's all put together out there, so that we can have a better understanding of these things. Although sometimes Catholic theology can be a little bit of using the word to define itself. So like the gratuitous graces, that's kind of a funny phrase that I was thinking of. Like, oh, Mark might not like that, but whatever, that's at the end of the second part of the Summa. So
it's got to bottom out somewhere, and that's where people are upset. And I'm like, but your understanding of the world bottoms out somewhere. Why can't you just say, oh, well, I can't understand the world because it's bigger than me. It was here first. You would think that alone would put a bunch of stuff to bed, and people just right over their head and they just keep going. And I'm like, what are you doing? Do you know that like there was a space that was here before you that you now inhabit and walk around within? And that because it's older than you and there isn't a perfect record of it, and that you're much, 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 much smaller than it, that there's just most of it that you can't know anything about at all. And
it's a fundamental, it's like they're anti-wonder.
Right.
Like that's what it is. They're
Science
against
is
wonder,
anti-wonder.
and like, like, and just looking out at there, and you don't realize like on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, this was like 6 months or a year ago, I don't even remember, but Jean C was like, hey man, what's going on in the Catholic Church in France? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on in the Catholic Church in France, right? Like
That's
a long ways away from me. I don't have like any real tight friends in France. I've heard some things, but like you could get that information from any Catholic news source that reports the right stories. So it's like, don't ask me what's going on in France. Like there's a bunch of Catholics in Brazil too. I don't know what's going on in Brazil. That's a long ways away from me. I barely know what's going on in Fargo. Like, what's going on at St. Anthony's? I don't know. I know the people who are there though, and I could actually figure that out. But
you do wonder about
and
it.
It's fine,
Yeah.
Yeah, I could wonder, like, what are those French people up to, for Pete's sake?
Right.
Right. What are these lay ecclesial movements in France all about?
But that's the flattening of the world and the inability. Like, if you can't understand that, you're so far away from understanding hierarchy that there's no hope for you, really. Like, I'm sorry, you're kind of cooked. You need to just submit and never worry about any of that stuff. It's so much bigger than the fact that somebody in Fargo, North Dakota, has no idea what's going on in France. I mean, you should have figured that one out on your own.
All right. I am going to hop off and continue listening to you guys. I'll see you all later. So,
See you, Christopher. Great to
Bye.
see you, man. Take care.
Yes, nice to talk to you instead of just reading you.
Even if he likes to torture me
regular
constantly.
commenter. Yeah, well, you always give such a great reaction to it. Like, if you don't want to be made fun of, then like have no reaction when somebody does it.
It's
That's how
torture. It's not made fun of. It's like intellectual corneal abrasions. Come on.
I don't know what a libration is, so
Corneal
you put me
abrasions?
into wonder once again. No.
It was one of the that's apparently one of the most painful forms of torture. They used to do it in Vietnam, from what I've been told. So you scratch the cornea of the eye, and you
Oh,
can't
yeah,
blink
okay.
without being in agony. Yeah, yeah. That and the bamboo, the burnt lit bamboo in the under the fingernails thing is another good one. But the corneal abrasion
Yeah.
is supposed to be way worse.
What's up with the Vietnamese, man?
I was talking to Bruce about this the other day because a buddy of mine was a sniper in, I think he was in Laos on the Cambodian border. And the things he was saying about, we'll say, not just the Khmer Rouge, but our psychological tactics against the Khmer Rouge in response. And then I was trying to explain to Bruce, no. That was in the 2000s. That wasn't. Let's see. Yeah. I caught him 2 years after he got out. I'm like, so wait a minute. You're telling me that you did this particular type of thing with your platoon or whatever in the jungles of Laos or wherever they were. I think it was Laos, but it might not have been. Like 2.5 years ago. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I don't think the American people.
This guy like a Green Beret?
No. He was a sniper though. And snipers, what they do, like they will dig a hole in the ground and stay in that hole without moving for 3 days to get their target and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a bunch of logistical questions that you have, and the answer is no, we really do stay in the hole and don't leave for 3 days.
Yep.
How this is possible? Like, I look at that and I go like, I don't believe you because I can't. I don't have the mental capacity to process what you're saying at all.
Well, that's why you're not a sniper, apparently.
That's why I'm not one of the many reasons I'm not a sniper. But no, he was in special forces. These are just regular forces. Who knows what the special? But like, because they're so brutal over there, the troops respond in kind, and that is a horrific. Because it's talk about violation of Western norms. Like, holy cat! Like, what are you doing? But you have to speak the language of the country you're in. Like, when in Rome, right? That's when in Rome is a real problem, and that's the real solution. Is when you're in Rome, you better speak, act, and think like a Roman, or you're not going to be in the world much longer. So,
I remember an Ender's Game. I'm going to spoil Ender's Game. So Ender's Game spoilers coming right ahead. You know, there's the alien race. Can't remember what they're called. That encounters humanity, and the first time they encounter a human ship out in space, they board it and kill everybody.
The buggers,
right? And yeah, the buggers. That's right. And you know, humanity's outraged. This begins a war. This was a declaration of war. This is clearly species bent on our annihilation, and thus begins the events of the whole book. And spoilers. We go and annihilate them because that's, you know, that's why he's called Ender. He just ends things. As it turns out, the buggers have a hive mind and don't consider the individual parts to be worthy of rights. Right? There's no concept of bugger dignity in the individual because they're a psychic hive mind thing there, and so they wouldn't think anymore of boarding another ship and killing everybody on it than you would have like, trimming your fingernails or maybe getting pricked and losing a few drops of blood. Um, and just based on a book that you recommended for me, The Geography of Thought, where people think of themselves first as a part of a whole rather than as an individual with dignity. If that doesn't play into the difference between things like the Geneva Convention and the way things used to be here and are still practiced in other parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, and another corruption of the hierarchy, for example, happened due to the myth of World War II and the transition away from kingly power. So the last transition away from kingly power, and it's so like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's all Versailles, and I'm like, why are these bad things happening at Versailles? And then it's like, oh, that's right, Versailles was founded on corruption. Basically, it's Versailles is like the monument to corruption. So what they did was, as the result of the original Treaty of Versailles, which of course is the sole quote catalyst for the thing that people refer to as World War II, which is a ridiculous way to talk about the world.
World War
we
Part
have
Two.
the
World War Part Two. We just got to add
World
one
War-
word.
Great War
Yeah,
Part
World War
Two.
Part One,
Yeah.
World War Part Two. Yeah.
But the Geneva Convention and the Nuremberg trials are an elevation of the legal system past the bounds of a legal system. Like a legal
International
system
law.
only works in a country. It doesn't work, right? And so canon law only works because it's basically in the country of God or something. It's got
The kingdom of
but it
God.
has
Yeah.
limited authority.
Right. Yeah. So
Trade-off.
yeah, well, there's one thing we don't regulate in canon law is trade,
Right. Well, there's a bunch of things you don't do. Well, you also don't interfere with a country scale legal system.
No. In fact, there's quite a bit of especially. So I just studied book 5, temporal goods. So that's property and that sort of thing. And like, there's a lot of places where we're just sort of like, yep, you got to make sure to also follow civil law when you're doing this, right? So that makes it complicated because you've got to follow the canonical procedures and then make sure that, if you're buying or selling property, that you're also doing everything civilly. And there's a canon that's like, if a transaction was completed, which is valid according to civil law, but invalid according to canon law, the competent ecclesiastical authority has to decide how to proceed.
Nice.
And what actions, if any, are to be taken to recover damages. And there was a great example that our professor gave of a pastor who had a rural parish that had a lot of wooded land that they owned. And the pastor paid a logging company to come in. No, he got paid, right? He sold lumber for about $30,000, and like this wasn't like a horrible, decimation of the land. They logged responsibly. They took a certain number of trees, and he was quite satisfied because it's like this was just a great deal for us. We had the lumber, we had the land, the money was useful for roof repair or something like that. And my professor, the canon law, was talking to him. Was like, well, that for that level of alienation of church property, you should have gotten the consent of the diocesan bishop, right? And the guy was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Because, doesn't matter if it's lumber, doesn't matter if it's a great idea. Over a certain threshold, you got to get permission before you sell it, or at least a consultation, And he's like, okay, so what you're going to do is you're not going to talk about this until the period of prescription is run, 3 years. And then once prescription is run and you can't be prosecuted for it anymore, that'll be fine. And in an invalid alienation, it can also be sandated by the passage of time. So even if you sold things that and you did it wrong, you didn't get the appropriate ecclesial permissions, if people hold on to it for long enough, then passage of time will just heal that. So all that to say, yeah, canon law is well aware of the fact that we don't run everything.
Yeah. Yeah, but in the secular world, I mean, it's just a lot of people are confused by the globalism. The globalism isn't confusing at all. It's a continuation of the corruption that was actually started by Napoleon, technically. See Navigating Patterns, all the history videos. But then continued with Nuremberg, where they were applying the law to war to war. And I'm like, no. War, by definition, as a fundamental principle, starting axiom, is the breakdown of law. Like, that's what it is, right? It's the breakdown of order as such, which would include law, which is a type of order that is contained within a country, and that's why and people don't realize it's totally unprecedented. No one ever did anything like that before in history. No one would ever even think to try to do anything that dumb in the entire history of the world, because they know it's fraught with stupidity and danger. They know.
And it's not that like they wouldn't try and do anything, right? Like you can imagine, the Pope was very upset about the Fourth Crusade. It was supposed to go to the Holy Land. It was not supposed to go to Byzantium. Like that was not the point of all of that. And so but he just kind of like chewed them out for not doing what he had sent them to do, rather than trying to do some kind of a legal process. So it'd be like a moral condemnation of that, rather than
I mean, it's also tricky. I mean, the other thing that I didn't cover in my video because it was already too long is that the hierarchy is also the thing that interfaces with the world. And so not all the functions of the hierarchy are contained within the hierarchy. Some of the functions are actually contained, we'll say, by natural law, right? Or by the rules of the universe or something, however you want to, like all hierarchies on the earth are subject to gravity, because it just turns out that gravity was here before hierarchy, right? And so,
except for St. Joseph Cupertino, but never mind that.
But that's hierarchy gives you the interface with those things that are bigger than you, but it's also beholden to them, because those things are it's contained within them, obviously, right? So, right, and people are really confused about that because they don't understand how these things work, and they don't have a good sense for what
you
to
have
do
a good
about.
example of let's take something in the business world, right? How the hierarchy. Let's say you've got a small computer electronics store. Can you come up with an example of how the hierarchy relates the individuals to the rest of the world, interfaces that?
Sure. I mean, even outside the store, when you're asked about who you are, you might give, "Oh, I work at blah 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 store."
Okay,
Right?
so
And
it gives people a way to relate to you. Like, oh, what's that polo shirt that
exactly.
you're wearing? Maybe you're at a fair, right? And
Exactly.
you're trying to. It's like, oh,
But also the store is subject to the law of the land. So if they don't pay you, right. See, this is the hierarchy is not in charge. That's not what a hierarchy is. It's a mode of cooperation, not a mode of tyranny. Right? Lots of things tyrannize you, like gravity and your need to breathe oxygen and the fact that water is wet. And like I could go on, like everything around you is a constraint on you in some way. And there's like that, like it or not, that's already happened and there's nothing you can do about it. So rather than spending your time going, well, yeah, but we can, get in a rocket and escape the gravitational field of the earth. You can't escape gravity.
you've got way bigger problems then.
Exactly. And the cost is very high. And by the way, you can't do that. A hierarchy built that rocket, right? Probably several, right? And so you didn't.
Yeah,
escape
you don't have
hierarchy
mom
at
and
all.
pop. You don't have mom and pop rocket shops. That's for sure.
Right. Well, and the ones that you do aren't going to get you into space. So
Right,
right,
yeah.
because a smaller hierarchy can build a smaller rocket, but it's a smaller, right? And so it's like, wait a minute. And then of course, in your mind, you're missing all the pieces. Like, sure, maybe if you're Katy Perry, look retarded and go up in a blue rocket for Bezos's marketing campaign. But as a practical matter on the Earth, you and I are not going up in a rocket. Like, it's not going to happen.
We would have to start when we're 15. You have to start when you're 15, becoming an astronaut. Then
we could get lucky, right? We could, get on Twitter and Elon goes, "You guys are cool. What do you want?" And we go, "We just want to go into space." Elon goes, "All right, let's do this." And, makes us part of his marketing campaign. Right?
Then,
But
I would give like a blessing to the whole Earth. Oh, it'd be awesome.
It would be awesome. That would be awesome. We'll put it on the list, Father. I get the software tests going now.
I'll get delegation from the Pope to bless the whole Earth.
Yeah. So what those hierarchies are still subjected to what I'm calling the natural order. I don't know if you caught any of the book club, but I had to.
I did not. I
was
driving.
Peterson. So
I was
you'll be
driving.
pleased. Well, I don't know how much
Probably
time you
Wisconsin.
actually had, or whether or not you had time to listen, or in the car or anything, but that's fine. I think you'll be pleased.
Okay.
Yeah, you hold that up. I would have had it rigged somehow to feed my laptop and had the laptop playing. You do these things and I just look at them and go, "That's a technical problem. I know how to solve that."
Yeah. You got to have the will to solve it too. I'm glad your book club went well. I hope everybody who participated in the book club benefits from it.
I think so. I wouldn't say it went well. I pulled it off, but it was, from my side, it was a bit of a disaster. First of all, I somehow managed to not do my reading the day before, which is just, I'm still puzzling over what happened. Like, what happened, Mark? The book was right here. You had time. Where did it all go? Because you didn't work on that, right? And then I woke up in the morning and the laptop was frozen. Completely frozen. And the problem with that, and it sort of half came back to like, the problem with that is because it's a laptop and because it's like a brandy new type laptop, it's not one of these, 10-year-old laptops that's built correctly. You have to disassemble it to shut it off because it's got a battery. Right. So, and then once you disassemble it, it's like, well, now I have to dust the damn thing, which, you have to do once in a while anyway. That was not the day that I wanted to do that work. So I disassembled it. I dusted it all off. I put it back together. It blew 2.5 hours. Then I had to get thumbnail together, do all the StreamYard setup, do the Rumble setup, get all that linked together, right? Set all that up. And then I had to do the reading, which I finished 2 minutes before we went live, because it's not reading. I have to read and take notes. So I've got this huge set of notes on chapters 1 and 2 of 12 Rules for Life. And then I was so exhausted at the end that I basically had to take a nap and got very little done for a few hours after that. It was a rough day yesterday. It was not the kind of day I thought I was going to have at all. Completely different. But I pulled it off. And yeah, I think you'll like it because I kept harking back to created order and saying, no, you need to add the term created order to your vocabulary, and it fixes all of this. And then you don't have to do this silliness anymore.
Yeah. And it's funny what people will accept, right? Like they're fine with gravity, right? It's like, well, something that you can't absolutely defend. The fun thing about something like natural law, so the definition of natural law is the rational creature's participation in the eternal law, right? So certain participation that only human beings and angels have the capacity to do. And it's a useful way to talk about it because you can break the law, right? Like you could just decide that you're not going to participate in the eternal law in the way that God is ordering and governing the universe He's created. You can just decide to do whatever you want, and so that's where that law is useful because you can speed, you can steal things, That's against the law, but like, well, you can still do them. There's just gotta be consequences to your actions. So that's one of the utilities of talking about the natural law. But the created order would be a broader concept, and maybe that's what you need to be talking about in a certain situation.
Yeah, you need that as a starting point, because the Peterson's problem is the starting point is always your personal private perspective that comes about when you become conscious or something. And it's like, I don't know, man, like that's pretty. You would talk about self-reference. Chapter 2 is all self-reference, right? It's treat yourself as if you're somebody you were responsible for helping. And it's like, treat yourself like you treating you, right? There's the circular reference.
Relation relating to itself, is that what we're talking about here? Some of that Kierkegaard stuff?
Yeah, but the problem is, at the same time, if you take them in order, especially, like, you need those steps that small, because it's a small step from, because stand up straight with your shoulders back, which is the first rule in 12 rules for life. That's a different type of self-reference. It's purely self-contained. It doesn't reference outside of you. But the second rule references outside. It says, look, there's objects outside of you, and you take better care of them than you do of yourself, right? So it's one step up in that way. And if you didn't see that, like, fair enough, like, I get it. But also, you don't understand what Peterson's doing at all, like any of it. If you do not understand the difference between chapter 1 and chapter 2, as subtle as it is, then you cannot understand any of his Maps of Meaning lectures correctly. And you cannot understand what he did in his biblical series. And you can't, like, you're just not understanding what he's doing, because you're not seeing all the little tweaks and steps he's making and how he's very carefully ordering them. And sometimes he does a bad job. Like chapter 2 of 12 Rules for Life is a mess. Like in terms of writing, is horrible. It's absolutely horrible, because the title never gets discussed practically in the chapter at all. It's like, wait, what happened here? Like the first one, you did a much better job. In chapter 2, you're like all over the map, and you're talking about archetypes and women in chaos, and how women in chaos are bad archetypes, right? And like all those linkages are there. And I'm like, nah, this is all garbage. We're gonna throw all this out. So I excoriated chapter 2 pretty harshly, if I do say so myself. But it was necessary, because I didn't want people getting caught up in this stuff that had nothing to do with the title of the chapter, and was also just technically wrong. Technically, no, that's not. Someone has mommy issues. That's what this chapter says. It doesn't say anything about the topic, or it doesn't say much. There's a few pieces in there, but it didn't link back very well. But I'll be curious when you get around to listening to it, what you think of it, and then hopefully you can join
I'm going
us
on
for
a
one of these.
silent retreat, right?
Oh, that's right. Well, you'll have plenty of time.
No. Listen, Mark, this is good. This is good. This isn't something I'd expect somebody on your level of the hierarchy to understand. The priests need to go away and just talk to God.
That's
And
important.
it's okay if you don't understand why that's important, right? But it just needs to happen.
Yeah. No, that's definitely important. Yeah. So when are you going on your retreat?
Thursday.
Oh, okay. It's Thursday to Thursday. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have to end it early. It's supposed to be an 8-day retreat, and I'm doing 7 days. Yep. It'll be fine.
An 8-day
You don't have
retreat?
to do. Yeah, that's on the more intense end of retreats. A lot of retreats are 5 days and not fully silent. But I haven't been on a silent retreat in a while, and I want to go on one because there's certain affordances to when you just shut out everything that you can't get. So beautiful grounds. Yeah.
Well,
Good spiritual director.
That's what people are missing. Like, oh, I don't want to see anybody having to direct traffic at Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, I bet that person has more wisdom than you ever will because they direct traffic and then they have quiet time in their heads to think about all the things you have no time to think about because you're on the internet being bombarded by utter trash 24/7 and you don't even realize you're overloaded. You're so flooded out. You just think you're
But
swimming in the
that
ocean
doesn't
and that's
apply to
normal.
this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, right? This is good, wholesome, quality content. So you just keep
This
on
and
listening, all right?
and navigating patterns. Those are the only two channels you need to listen to on YouTube. Can confirm.
Yeah, yeah. No, the silence is good. I remembered very much enjoying a summer that I did a lot of lawn mowing in seminary.
Mm.
Hired as a lawnmower, and boy, I just had deep thoughts. Just deep thoughts in that, reflecting on the things I was being taught. Just, just, just being there. It's good for you. It's good for you. So yeah, but yeah, no, an 8-day silent retreat. It's not quite as intense as a 30-day. That's what the Jesuits kind of invented and perfected, was the 30-day retreat.
30?
Now you get a day of recollection, or a day of rest every 10 days. So I think you do like 9 days of silence, get a day off. 9 days of silence, you get a day off, and then another 9 or 10 days. But yeah, no, 30-day retreats. I've never been on a 30-day before. 8 days is my max.
I have done the equivalent of 30-day fasts, not necessarily food, but that 30 days of abstinence in something, and I can do it. But like, that's rough. That's hardcore right there.
No, and the first week is hell. Literally in an Ignatian 30-day retreat, the first week is literally you're meditating on hell 5 times a day. So
No,
yeah,
thanks.
I was an altar boy as a kid. I began to serve in 4th grade at St. Sistfin's Catholic Church in Stavanger, Norway. And I thought it was the best thing ever. I got to put on a special uniform. I got to do things that nobody else got to do. And if I was good and kept it up, I could have been the guy who was swinging the smoker thing. And that was very interesting to me at the age of 10, the possibility of swinging the smoker thing around. So yeah, and I remember there was 2 priests there. There was the senior, the pastor there, and also the young, newly ordained priest. And just the way the young newly ordained priest carried himself, I think that made a big impact on me in 4th grade. That I didn't know it was happening, but like he was the one who was in charge of training us for the liturgy.
Hmm.
Wore his cassock around a lot. Classic young priest move. And yeah, so
you
anyway,
decided
that might have had something to do with how I ended up here.
you decided to participate in the hierarchy in a more intimate
I
or
think
a
my
higher
parents
quality
decided for
relationship
me,
way.
but my parents decided for me, but they didn't have to fight me too hard on it. So
Well, but right, and see that's the other missing thing is formation. Like, yeah, when you don't form your kids, you get this world. This is like look around. This is what you get when you don't form children. You get basically a bunch of adults who seem like they shouldn't be children, but actually act identical to them, but not in all ways. So it's very confusing because they'll be perfectly normal. Like I know people. Well, the first time I saw this, it was Richard Stallman. And Richard Stallman's like famous, right? He's the open source guy, although it's called open source, it's called free software, right? Richard Stallman was like, I think he was 36 or something like that. And he threw a temper tantrum over where we were going to eat food. And it was such a shock to me being there in person 3 feet from him watching this and being like, you're having a temper tantrum like a 4-year-old and you're a genius. Like he won the MacArthur a Genius Award, right? And Like, he got MacArthur grant, Genius grant. He's got all this stuff, and like I typed for him. He's a freaking brilliant programmer, man. Like, he is no joke at all. He really knows his stuff. But there he was having a meltdown over where we were going to eat dinner, and it was just like, what is happening? I'm a lot younger than you, boy. What are you doing? Just like a 4-year-old, though, like identical to, except he's dressed like an adult and he's the height of an adult. It was really weird.
Yeah,
It's obviously,
yeah.
I still remember it. It was very strange.
Like I would need to be under extraordinary pressure to revert to that kind of state.
I don't think
Like
you
I
can do
need to
it.
have like the month of the worst days of my life to actually melt down like that. I would probably just leave, right? If I was really mad,
no,
I'm
I
like,
don't.
all right, I'm
I
done,
would-
and then you're out.
I mean, the purpose of childhood is to grow out of things like temper tantrums. I mean,
Right.
if you didn't, right? But you need to be formed, and the more I look at the pattern now, not back then, because couldn't see the pattern from the single instances that I had, and I was just learning all this stuff. Like, this is all unformed children of wealthy and upper middle class people. That's all the Free Software Foundation is. That's all a lot of these other sort of freeform hippie-ish organizations. That's all they are. Alex Hormozy is one of these, actually, rather clearly. It's so, you listen to the biographies of people, especially when they're talking about their own upbringing, and the number of things it explains immediately about everything about them is ridiculous, right? Like, you hear an excerpt of a partial biography of Kierkegaard, right? And like, everything he did makes total sense, and he's the Luther of Lutheranism, and that's all you need to know about him. That's why you don't need to listen to anything he says, because he's retarded. Like, he's just following this pattern of rebellion within the original rebellion church. And it's like, oh, well, this is why he has these dopey questions, because he, like any, we'll say, slightly above average intelligence, you can see instantly where Luther went wrong. Like, that's actually not that hard, right? And then it's like, oh, he saw all those things that were wrong. And then he's in the Lutheran church, so he's trying to do something with that. And then he just ends up making everything worse, because of course you're going to make things worse. Like, you're starting from a bad place, trying to like fix it, and you need to go back, like, because you can go back. You can go back to the Catholic Church, and then the problems that Luther created aren't there because they couldn't be, by definition, because he created those problems. It's not that difficult, right? That's why when people say we can't go back, I'm like, what are you saying? Every decision we've made, we'll say culturally, has been a good one, because that's what you're saying. And I've got questions for you. I've got a lot of questions for you.
That's a result of materialistic thinking. It has to be, right? You can't causality can't work backwards in time. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, that's not what we mean. We just mean that we could see an older pattern and like just start doing that instead of the stupid stuff that we're doing.
But it's worse. It's materialist in two ways. So the way that you suggested, where because they take the 4 causes, they throw out final cause entirely. They never think or talk about that, because that's hard, right? That's in the future. So, that freaks these people out. Everybody's compressed time. But then the other 3 causes are compressed down to material only. And that's another good way to define materialism. How many causes do you have in your system, right? And you hear somebody like Lawrence Krauss talk, and he's like, there are no why questions. There are only how questions. And I'm like, great, dude. You've compressed all 3 causes. You still threw out final cause. You've compressed all 3 causes down to how. That's amazing. But that's the ultimate clear materialism. But at the same time, right? So because they have that compression, you're right. The only way they can go back is by materially backing out things that have happened. Of course, you can't actually do that. That's kind of obvious, even to those retards. But it's worse, because material is primary, more material is always better. And so you can't unmaterial anything. Like you can't dismantle anything that's come before, because that implies, at least in their limited minds, and I really do technically mean these guys are just not this smart about this stuff. They might be smart about other things, but they're not smart about what they're talking about, right? It means there's less material. And of course, that's already foolish from a physics perspective. But again, this is how they are talking and thinking, for sure. I've had long conversations with these people. They're definitely not understanding basic concepts here.
Yeah, it's I remember there was a particular passage, I think it was in G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, where he talked about, and this was early on, right? So he like kind of went through his life and the different phases he had. And he was talking about like the materialism that was popular in his day. And he always saw that as a prism, you know, and he saw that these people like, well, no, I mean, look at how massive and big and beautiful the world is, you know, and like the sheer number of stars, you know, and he's like, you know, I don't think the people who are in Reading jail would be happy to know that it now took up the entirety of England. And like that doesn't actually fix their problem. They're still in jail, you know.
Right.
And so, yeah, he had it was a very, very, very Chesterton way of going about that question. It's like, you didn't fix the problem, you just made it bigger.
Right. Well, and that's what, I mean, I think if you look at every so-called philosopher past Aristotle, right, because there aren't any, and you look into their biography, what you will see is that their so-called philosophy reflects a pattern of them trying to resolve something that happened to them in their life by casting it as a problem one layer up in the culture, or in society, or in the world, and then solving it there instead. Right? So really all they needed to do was apologize to daddy. But instead they projected onto the world and said the real problem is nothing to do with me and my childhood and me and my father. The real problem is, right? And then they cast it into culture. And that's what I mean by, like, no, seriously. I mean, you know, Pastor Paul unwittingly introduced me to the biography for Kierkegaard. And I'm like listening to this going like, I cannot be the only person that sees this, but maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Or you read, so my buddy Jesse in Australia sent me a copy of Clockwork Orange to read, which, you know, I never wanted to read that book, that's for sure. But like a significant portion of the tiny book that he gives, it's a tiny story, but it's like a tiny book. It's a little penguin book, right? A significant part of the pages in that is just the story of how that book got written. And I read that first because this is the first part of the book. I'm just going through the pages in order. I'm not, Og, go in order. Og, not smart, right? Thank goodness.
If they didn't want me to read this first, they wouldn't have put it at the beginning.
Well, and the thing is, it provides so much excellent context so that when you read A Clockwork Orange, you go, oh, well, I see what's going on here. Like, forget about the story and what's in it. Like, the story is interesting in some ways, and what's in it is kind of sort of interesting in some ways. But the driving force behind the story, it just exposes why it is the way it is and what's happening. Because the story is only the result of two things. One traumatic event that killed his first wife. Oh, that might have an impact on an author, right? And his diagnosis that he was going to be dead, and his desire to make sure his second wife had enough royalties to live the way she wanted to live. So the story is part of a bunch of stories that he wrote. Not only that, he wrote them by saying, how many words can I write per day? How many stories does that translate into? Will that provide enough income for what I'm trying to accomplish? That was the driving force behind the story. Not just
I haven't heard all of that. I had heard that he banged it out in 6 weeks for cash. Like that was as much of the story as I had heard.
No. He has and it was a false diagnosis. But he has a diagnosis. He's gonna be dead in like 6 months or whatever it is, and he's figuring out, can I write enough stories as a writer to make sure that she has enough money so that when I'm dead, she's taken care of. That's the whole driving force behind Clockwork Orange and a bunch of his other work. I mean, he's actually making a calculation of how many words he can write per day in order to figure out how many stories he can crank out from those words. And it's just like, well, there's some materialism for you. And in the background, he has this unresolved issue, which is very much like what happens in the book, right? Which really makes me wonder about what the hell was going on in England at the time. It's like there were roving bands of teenagers sexually assaulting and beating people on the streets randomly, which is probably what was happening, to be fair. But that actually happened to his first wife, and she died as the result. And so it's like all of this is what drives that story. And once you understand it, so this is his quest to understand that incident, but he's doing it within a monetary context. And then the better part is the thing you probably don't know also is, so he then goes to sell the book in the US, and the US publisher just makes a suggestion. Like the guy writing this, I forget the name of the guy writing this, but he's like
Anthony Burgess, right?
No, the guy writing the bio. Telling the story about Burgess, right? He says very much, it really doesn't look like the publisher said, go do this. It looks like he said, I don't know, I think the ending might be better if you ended it a chapter early. And then what is revealed, which of course meant nothing to me reading the story at all, because that story is not written for somebody with my education level, technically, right? So the chapter, I think there's 22 chapters or something, but it's set up in this weird mathematical way, Clockwork Orange, to reflect this. No, it's 20. Is it 21 chapters? I think it's 21 chapters to reflect the 7 stages of man in 3 phases. Which is some Shakespearean thing, I guess. Apparently, I don't know anything about it, right? Because like this is not written for people like me. It's actually technically a book I should not read because I can't. Like he's writing about making literary references in the number of chapters. So not written down anywhere. They're not propositional. It's part of the structure of the text, and I don't understand any of that. So the reason why he does that is because he realizes the U.S. book market is big, and he just happens to need money at that time. He already hasn't died, so he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, now I need money. Now I need money, not just her, right?" So he chops that chapter off, and then Kubrick goes to make the movie.
Yeah, without the last chapter, which has got a bit. If I've never actually read it, but I've heard that the last chapter is a little bit redemptive of the story. Like
it's redemptive. It's the redemption chapter. Yeah. It's entirely now. Is it a good redemption? I would say no. Of course not. But it is a redemptive chapter, and he is allowed to give his input into the movie, and all he does is cause problems for them instead, because again, he's focused on the money. So every single time, the thing that gets in the way of his art manifesting artistically is his greed in every case. And so I have no sympathy for this guy whatsoever. Like none. I'm just like, yeah, he sucks. Terrible.
Yeah. Right. I saw, this is just kind of vaguely related, but it might be interesting. A video of somebody who was studying basically like really low effort YouTube channels that specialized in shorts and have a bunch of there's a very clearly AI generated workflow there. And what this guy, he was just trying to figure out what's going on in YouTube shorts, and I'm going to make a YouTube video out of it. And I don't do shorts, right? Because
right,
I'm old and it's not for me. And what he found is that there's this whole group of people writing blog posts and telling each other like how to make money off YouTube with minimal effort, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and it what it basically comes down to is like doing a really like stealing other people's clips. That's the first thing you got to do is you got to steal somebody else's clip
Right.
because you're not going to go out and then you like put a really awful AI generated voice over it, and then you also just end it early, and that
Yep.
like apparently, yeah, just and it's like, oh my gosh, that's literally just parasitic, right? That's a
Yep.
parasite right there. It's
Yep.
on the spiritual level, so it's not quite as horrifying as a bot fly, but it's essentially the same thing. You're just living off of the health of something else, um, and probably preying on people who are either very young or very new to the internet. Um, and I don't like it. That's basically what it comes down to. And
No,
Anthony
it's
Burgess was doing the same thing with his art,
yeah.
apparently,
Yeah.
according to
Yeah.
your read of the
Christopher's correct.
situation.
It's the 7 ages of man from Shakespeare's As You Like It.
That's the fun one. That's the one where the girl dresses up as the boy to try and see if her lover is really true to him. Yeah.
Yeah, I know
It's a
the guy's
comedy,
name.
so
Oh, here it is. It's Blake Morrison who wrote the introduction. But like the freaking introduction to this book, because Clockwork Orange, I mean, it's a tiny book.
right.
It's a nothing. It's a nothing text.
He
The
banged it out in 6 weeks for cash.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's a little more complicated, but yes. Yeah, the introduction is 24 pages, which is, you know, a sizable chunk of the pages in the book, actually, at some level. But it's a fascinating introduction, and I think I don't know. I'll have to ask Jesse one of these days. Did you know that was in here? Because boy, that explains everything. It made the book readable. Because I would not have been able to read it without that context at all. Um, but the fact
Interesting
that
that
he's
the
making
guys
literary references at a quote meta level, right? Where it's like, yeah, it's not written in the text, but it's part of the structure not only of the chapters, but how the chapters are written, which is very important, right? In other words, you can't just make the reference to 7 ages of man, and leave it at that, right? Like you you have to reflect it in the chapters. It can't just be like, oh, there's 7 chapters, so it must be the 7 ages of man. That doesn't work, right?
Yeah, well, if you're organizing something, right? Um, and you want it to be organized, you look for structure outside of yourself that's already there that's going to help you organize these things already, right? So um, this is so my dad was organizing a couples retreat, right? And he didn't know anything about how to do retreats at that time. He had never put on a retreat before, so he did a very rational, intelligent thing. He asked another priest to run this retreat. It's like basically like, hey, I'm going to take care of all the logistical stuff. I'll make sure that we've got a calendar and the location, and I'll do all the communications. But I don't know like the actual like how to run this thing, right? And he was so impressed with how this priest figured out to run it. The priest, doing a married couples retreat, just walked through the ceremonies of marriage and like the
Mm.
symbolism of all of that and
Mhm,
like
mhm.
how do so like here's the promises that you guys made when you got married, and here's all of these different things, so he basically just took the whole structure of his retreat out of the rite of marriage book, and my dad was so impressed by that. And then when he figured out like, oh, okay, so you find something else and you just figure out how you're going to organize it, and then like the talks just flow from that. He started
Yep.
doing his own retreats, um
Yeah.
and writing the book's got to be the same thing, and any good English author would have been well trained in Shakespeare, better trained probably than an American author, I would
Oh,
think,
easily.
I would imagine,
Oh,
in
no, easily.
Shakespeare at least. um And so he would just he would have maybe he had to memorize. I can't remember the name of the character who gives that speech, but it's from one speech of right in the middle of As You Like It, the cynical old comedian. I think that's who gave that speech. And you just like organize your whatever you come up with. That's how you do things. If somebody else has already done all the work, you just fill it in.
Yeah, and that's what he was doing. He was filling it in, but he was using it as a redemptive arc to forgive the people that killed his wife. It's just, like, wow. Right, by making them children, because they weren't actually. They weren't children. They weren't teenagers gone wild like the book portrays, right? And then casting them in that light, and then showing the redemptive arc for his character, and that's how he resolves this problem. I think actually his wife was pregnant too. Like it's a horrific story, but once you realize that, you're like, oh, I see why he wrote this book. And like, I see why this is the book that he wrote and why it sucks in so many different little ways. Like technically the writings from a technical writing perspective, it's very well written. A little too well written, right? Because it's very mechanical in some ways. The storytelling is not mechanical. But the storytelling is very regular because he's got 3 7-act chapters. I just looked at the structure because I didn't remember. I remember Blake Morrison writing about it. I didn't pay any attention to the structure of the book because I was like, well, I know what the structure of the book is. Who cares? But they dropped that the last act basically, and so that was the redemptive section. And but Anthony Burgess did that to himself. No one did that to him. It was not imposed upon him at all. So it's kind of like, dude, why are you continually compromising your art for money? I mean, what are you doing? And then you end up with trash that gets put into a movie that apparently is also trash. And yeah, I mean, the whole thing's a disaster. Just, but again, a little biography, right? And then bang, everything becomes clear, right? You can do that with Richard Branson. You can do it with all kinds of people. You just learn a little bit, and you're like, oh, I see where all of this comes from. Nietzsche. You understand a little Nietzsche. You understand a little Kierkegaard. You understand a little Heidegger.
Art.
It works for everyone.
Does it work for absolutely everyone?
No, because some people aren't trapped in their past. Like some people don't. They're not trying to replay or fix something in their past. They're more accepting.
There's like a lot of. I can see why somebody would have something horrible happen to them, and they would work it out in a book, right? Like that makes perfect sense to me because,
right?
Like, I'm going to go on this retreat. Keeps on coming up, right? And there's probably going to be like some things that come up. It's not going to be nearly what Mr. Burgess went through, right? Thanks be to God, I've had a somewhat more placid and calm life. But like the way that me and the spiritual director are going to work it out is like it's going to take the form of a story, one way or the other, right? So like, you have this problem that you keep on running into, Father. And maybe it comes up over and over again because of X, Y, and Z. And the way we're going to solve this is with X prime, which is different and is going to fix things, And like I've seen it happen in retreats before, and like it can happen again. I don't know what exactly is going to happen, but like something certainly could happen. And so that's the way that you actually do these things but like, I'm not going to publish it in a book. Like that's just going to be like me, the spiritual director. I might tell some of my close friends about it. Like these are the good things that happened on the retreat. There might be a sanitized version for YouTube because y'all just get, a flat slice of me. You're not going to get the whole thing. You don't want the whole thing. People need to not say so much on the internet sometimes. Too much information. It'll very easy to fall into too much information.
Too many people giving their private lives on the internet, especially in certain little cults on the internet there. That's all they're doing. And it's horrible. I always look at that and I go, maybe you won't regret that later, but you're definitely not going to be happy about having done that at some point in your life. Like it might not, we'll say, rise to the level of regret. I don't the nice part about being stupid is that the magnitude of your errors doesn't scare you at all because you don't see it. So
Well, that's
great.
the because some of these conversations, if you were to just not record them, would actually be really good for people.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be known, they want to start their own YouTube channel instead of just cooperating with somebody who already has one, right? And that's why, like, they don't understand. You are flattening the world by doing that, because the more YouTube channels there are, the more attention spread out. Now you can't have big YouTube channels. It's a math problem. It's an actual well-known mathematical problem that you're creating by not cooperating with people. Which is just bizarre to me. I'm like, you can just fix this really easily, right? And the problem is everybody wants to be the star, the hero, whatever. It's all this, and once you consider too,
Be
a
famous
lot
for
of
5 miles, man. I heard that from a wild man in a Florida swamp, right? He had a big
Right,
bushy beard.
right.
I could tell he was wise, and he said, "Just be famous for 5 miles," and I knew it was
Right.
true.
Yeah, but the Andy Warhol, who was a CIA plant, just saying, right?
Oh, you
Right.
can't just drop that stuff on my stream, Mark. Come on.
It's well known. You just look it up on Wikipedia. But like, he's the guy who said 15 minutes of fame for everybody, right? And Joseph Campbell, right? And there's people out there following Story Grid, which is story. If I
A
had
grid?
any Story
A
Grid.
grid?
Oh yeah. No, and it like you actually plug a spreadsheet in.
Gosh.
Right. You plug a spreadsheet in and that fixes your story. Right. So this is one of those things where I can't be in charge because I would actually jail everybody involved and probably everybody that read the website. Just right out. Because to me, like, there's only two things. There's the almighty perfection of beautifully written C code, and there's the almighty perfection of beautiful literature. And you cannot defile those things because I go absolutely nuts immediately.
It's a wicked it's an
can't
unnatural
handle it.
hybrid right there. It's just an unnatural hybrid. You can
Exactly.
Put,
I can't.
Can you put C? Can you put C into a grid?
No, actually. Well, that's the complaint. That's why people invented Rust. I'm like, well, actually, you don't want it. You don't want your computer language in a grid. You actually need, it's the exception parts that make it work, actually. Somebody posted this recently. I forget where I saw it. But he was like, people always complain that there's a bunch of go-to statements in the Linux kernel, I think is what he was talking about. And he's like, this is the dumbest complaint of all time, because if you use go-tos correctly, it saves you a bunch of code and prevents a bunch of problems that would happen if you were stuck in a loop of, unwinding a set of recursions or something. Like, it's far more efficient, and it's definitely the right answer. But because people early on, I mean, I never made this mistake. People early on picked up the don't use GoTo, it's bad in code. I'm like, no, GoTo is part of the programming languages by the brilliant ancient programmers for a reason. And it's a good reason. The fact
Brilliant
that you
programmers. Oh, that's what I'm interested in now. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. The fact that you can misuse it because you're retarded just says something about you. It doesn't say anything about the brilliance of the people who put GoTo in the language. You've got that backwards somehow because you're a crazy narcissist.
It's like when Monsignor Paget said, "The bishop can do what he wants so long as he knows what he does."
There you go. There you go.
It's like, well, yeah, you can use go-tos as long as you know how to use them, apparently.
Yeah, that pattern's absolutely everywhere, right? And that's what the fundamental problem is that once you see the pattern, like once you see the meaning crisis, it's like, oh yeah, that happened in the software industry, right? Or oh, that already happened in Japan. Japan already went through the meaning crisis. You just watch Ghost in the Shell from, what is it, 98, 97, something like that. There you go. That's the end of the meaning crisis. That's actually what happens. And then you see that, and then you see after the movie, right? You look at Japan now with the suicide cults and all the weirdness. That's the end of the meaning crisis right there. It's not imagined. Well, why did they go through it first? Because they adopted the materialist system that defeated them, and then it got accelerated by a number of factors, not the least of which was the fact that a very brilliant general ran Japan after the war, right? With Japan, which is a separate war, by the way, from the Great War. And then they adopted that, improved upon it, and accelerated it. And it just turns out that if you run your country like a military outfit, the meaning crisis manifests. And if you do it particularly efficiently, you'll run in front of all the other meaning crisis countries. This is basically, that's what happened to Japan. So
we gotta look to Japan to see what's coming next.
yeah. Well, you watch Ghost in the Shell, and then you look at Japan, you look at the suicide cult. And I was talking to my buddy, he works for Toyota, and he's like, yeah, we lost a guy. And I'm fairly sure I forget, they've got a name for it, right? These guys are just sitting there on the computers all day, and then they kind of figure out life isn't worth it, and they take their own lives. And then everyone's just like, oh yeah, he's gone now. It's like, what do you mean gone? No, he wasn't fired. No. Because in Japan, that would be a big deal. Oh, no.
Oh
He
yeah.
kept
Oh
the job
yeah.
till the end, right? Like,
They've got company men in Japan.
right. But they also can't say he committed suicide because that's also a loss of face. So it's just, he's gone. Right? It's very euphemistic. Like, hey, it's just gone now. And you have to kind of figure out, oh, that gone. And he didn't go to another company. He's just no longer with us as the world. So it's like, it's a very strange it's very strange. Pip, not according to the guy, to Blake Morrison. Blake Morrison says that actually the publisher did not remove it without Burgess's consent at all. In fact, I think if I remember correctly, and I might not be remembering correctly, but if I remember correctly, what Morrison did was he dug into it, and he said, yeah, Burgess said that later in life, but actually this is the letter from the publisher, and Burgess could have just said, no, we're leaving the chapter in. But he didn't do that because he was very eager to get the money and didn't want to push back because he needed money. And given all the other instances where that was definitely the case, that's almost certainly what happened. Because again, he could have done it too with Kubrick. And instead, he just decided to be a pain in the ass during the making of the movie and make himself unpopular for whatever reason.
And if you're on set with Stanley Kubrick and you're the pain in the ass, like, congratulations. We have reached levels. Of pain in the buttocks that should not have been possible. And yet here we are.
Well, I mean, if you're like an artistic person and you're sitting in the middle of a structure that's trying to manifest something that happens to have an aspect of art in it, you're going to be a pain in the ass automatically because you're not going to want things to go the way they go. Like I, for a good portion of my life, an embarrassingly large portion of my life, did not conceive of the fact that they do not, in fact, film movies in sequence that you see on the screen. Because I thought they filmed it in sequence and just cut out stuff they didn't want. They don't do anything like that when they film a movie.
No, that's
really.
It would be horribly expensive to do that. It would be horribly expensive to do that. So there's good reasons why, but that's why like acting isn't something that just anybody can do. Like Tom Cruise being able to like understand the story, understand what this scene is supposed to be, and to just show up and just like perform after maybe there's some rehearsals, but like not
Yeah.
a ton of, like that doesn't exist anywhere. That's why there's good actors and
Yeah.
bad actors.
Yeah. Christopher, no, I'll just tell you because I was there 10,000 years. No, it wasn't 10,000 years ago. But there were dinosaurs roaming the earth. What happened was don't use go to means you're retarded. You need to only use these parts of the programming language because otherwise you'll hurt yourself. That's what it means. The problem is that then got propagated. And that's like I was there. I watched this happen. And I was like, what a very strange thing. You're like, why would you
It's
follow
Canon
these idiots?
144. It's Canon 144. That's what it is, right? Canon 144 is in case of doubt of fact or doubt of law, the law itself provides a faculty for somebody who might not have it. And if you don't know what that means, then like don't count on it. Right?
There you go.
And
Yep.
you need to be good enough to actually understand, doubt of fact, what is it? Doubt of fact or common error, the law will supply the faculty. It's like if you can't figure out what that means, then just don't touch it.
Yep. When that's the thing we're suffering from. It's people are touching things that they don't have the capacity to understand at all. And they've been told they can do anything, which is a ridiculous lie. And then they try, and then they make everything worse for everybody. And then everyone's
Damn
upset
you,
at them.
Bob
And they
Iger.
don't know why. Yeah. And then they latch on to Nietzsche. Really? The guy who is just angry all the time. How weird. Or they latch on to Marx. It's same thing. Karl Marx, same thing. Right? Like, I mean, there's another biography, right? So you listen, Peterson talked to somebody a year or two ago, actually, about Karl Marx's childhood. And it's just like, oh, well, now I understand. Everything that he wrote makes total sense once you understand. Like his father is writing to him at the age of 18 saying, you're a demon and I don't think that's ever going to change, but I hope I'm wrong. And it's like, what? You're writing this to your 18 or 17-year-old son? Like, what kind of a terror was this guy? Holy crap. He must have been horrible. And then it's like, oh, well, the anger and resentment that he wrote in Das Kapital, which is also just technically a ridiculous tome that doesn't make any sense if you actually read any of it, oh yeah, of course he was angry and resentful. He had a demon in him, and the demon was getting called out constantly by everyone around him, right? Because I guess his wife too wasn't too happy with him all the time. It's like, what? And the worst part is, guess what? And people always miss this. He's the bourgeoisie. Like, he's in the wealthy. Now he
spent all of the socialists.
He spent all his money, right? So he was critiqued constantly. Like, I think it was his mother or something, or his sister or something, wrote like, well, we would love it if he could actually hold on to some of this capital instead of writing about it. Like, okay, fair. And then it's like, well, why is anybody listening to this lunatic? And I've explained this to people over and over again. He doesn't actually have a definition of capitalism. He uses the word. In fact, I think, because I did this research, I think every time he uses the word capitalism, he's actually referring to something different. Which, listen, that's a feat, man. Like, that's hard. That's actually genuinely hard to do. But he
doing anything 100% of the time is actually really difficult. Yeah.
Freaking grand slam home run, baby. Also, you're retarded. Like, what are you doing? And then people read him, and I'm like, why? Why? You can just grab all of his quotes about capitalism and see that he's not making any sense at all. This is ridiculous. You could take a small sample of his writing and figure out immediately it's garbage. Immediately. It takes no effort, no time.
Basically, what you're saying is that teaching everybody how to read was a mistake.
Well, but we didn't teach them how to read. We gave them literacy. And that's actually a huge, huge difference, because literacy and comprehension are not the same thing. Literacy is a knowledge and understanding of numbers and letters. That doesn't mean you can read. And the purpose of making everyone literate was actually not so they could read. So if that's what you think, you're actually ahistorical. The purpose of making people literate was so they could understand contracts and sign their name. That was it. It was purely for trade. It was purely to facilitate trade. And I don't even think that was a bad goal. But literacy has almost nothing to do with being able to read a book. Like, yes, you need to be literate to be able to read a book. But literacy does not rise. Like, being literate does not mean you can read a book. That is not what that means. It only means that you can understand basic terms of contract, and you can sign your name and see where other people have signed theirs. That's it. That's it. And you can do numbers. Not even you can do mathematics, because that's not in literacy either. But you know the difference between letters and numbers, because that's all the components you need to be able to know that a contract exists and be able to understand enough about the contract to know whether or not to sign it. And that's
Courts retired of adjudicating oral contracts.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it has a bunch of utility for people, right? I mean, but the problem with contract law in particular is that it enables a level of autonomy of the person that gives them the impression that individualism is actually a real concept, even though it's clearly not. That's actually the problem with it. And now we have a flood of literacy at the cost of comprehension. So now we have fewer people with good comprehension. In other words, fewer good writers, maybe screenwriters in Hollywood, right? We have a competency crisis in Hollywood. They don't understand story at all because they're using Story Grid, which is a spreadsheet. It pains me every time I think about it. It physically pains me. And that's why you're not getting good movies. It's that simple. And good TV shows, because none of these people know how to write, but they're all literate. And then you watch Jubilee with Peterson and you realize immediately what's going on. And then if you really want to shock yourself, watch Jubilee with Peterson and then go to PVK's channel and watch Greg, who was on Jubilee. Because I did this, and you could swear it's not even the same person. And it's definitely the same person. Like, that's how different he is. He sounds very competent on PVK's channel. And in Jubilee, he was a hot mess, a complete catastrophe.
You like the average person who just gets bombarded with questions by 20 different people is not going to do well. Like,
Peterson could have done well. Like the problem is, we now know it was a hit job, which I predicted immediately when I heard it. I said, "Oh, I know what happened here," and I was absolutely right. They told Peterson one thing, and they told the crowd another thing. But Peterson could have avoided that by watching the damn thing before he went. And so he still now that subtlety is the difference between a responsible person and an irresponsible person. Right. That's why. And that's actually the difference that people attack me about all the time. They're constantly going, "Mark, you don't know that." Right. The reason why is because they never research anything. And so they assume that I'm them and that I don't research anything. And it just so happens that when I talk about something, it is for exactly one of two reasons, with almost no deviation. I'm not perfect, but damn close. Right. It's because I have direct experience of it, or I have direct observation of it. So I don't say things unless one of those two things is true, unless I caveat it and say, well, I would suppose, or right. I do use those. It's not I never talk about anything I don't experience or observe, but you know the difference because I tell you up front. And I do that with we'll say, shocking accuracy and precision. But people don't assume that. They assume that when I'm talking, I'm them, and they never do that. Almost nobody ever does that. They'll just spew away about things they know nothing about, but I don't do that. And so they kind of get in trouble well, when they do that, because they're constantly tripping over that. And I'm like, no, I say that because of this. And I've been trying to explain to people lately, when I say let's use a hypothetical, the odds that I'm actually using something that is a hypothetical are very slim. Usually when I say that, I'm pissed off, and I'm like, I'm going to give you a real world example. You're going to object to it, and then I'm going to say, but that already happened. And then you're going to look like a moron, and I'm going to feel better about myself, even though I shouldn't. That's what happens. But I'm happy to give you a hypothetical if you'd like.
Well, I for one also happen to be a fan of reality. I prefer to live in reality and to work with reality. And as I look out the window, I notice that it's dark outside. And I think that rational creatures would go to bed under such circumstances. So I think we're going to call it a night. But good night. God bless you all. And unfortunately, no stream next week, but I will be praying. And maybe that's more important. So good night.